forward to being up here and playing golf, but then that got canceled. So, of course, we're not going to back down on our commitments to you all. And so, my Chief of Staff, Jordan Waters, he's here. My Chief of Staff, Chief Security, he lined us up. We've been on the road for the past 2 days. Well, this is a culmination of three days traveling up to North Idaho, meeting with wonderful people all over the state. And I will say that for you, since we took office, our budget, we've cut back our budget 7% for you. And I know he'd like to have a raise someday. It'll come. But, so thank you to Jordan. Also, I want to thank your technician, Jason. He's going to help me this evening with a presentation that I have. But your organization has done some great work in the recent years. We've talked about protecting your water rights on Lake Coeur d'Alene. And our Idaho Constitution, it says that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. That's very important to protect that. You've been actively engaged in the proposed acquisition of the Avista purchase by Hydro One. I can remember that a couple years ago on Campaign Trail, you were actively involved in helping to educate people. And then you worked to prevent the levy increase in Hayden. And so all of these are really worthy causes. And so tonight is an important event for all of you and your efforts, and it's important to raise money to support those efforts. So thanks for all that you do up here in North Idaho. Tonight I want to talk to you about 3 things. I'm going to give you kind of a brief overview of the COVID-19 response here in Idaho. I want to talk to you a little bit about the property taxation and property rights issue. And then I want to talk to you a little bit about what does the future of Idaho look like. So starting with the first area of discussion, and going back, and I did this and I go back and I'm going through my timeline of events and the notes, and all these wonderful memories started flooding back at me. But at the beginning of March 4th is when our governor created the coronavirus working group, and he assembled people on that committee to advise him on making decisions. On the 13th of March, our governor issued the disaster emergency under Idaho Code 46-1008. And under this act, it states that the governor may issue executive orders, proclamations, and amend or rescind them. Executive orders and proclamations have the force and effect of law. That happened on March 13th. We are still under this section of code today. Just the other day, the governor extended on September the 3rd, he extended that another 30 days. My good friend Art Mackenberg helped clarify. We need to learn from the experience we've had this past year, and understand what we need to do to correct deficiencies in our statute. My good friend Art brought to my attention that section of code specifically needs to be amended because the definition of disaster and emergency are 2 different things. They're not always the same thing. And so we might have this or we might have that, but it doesn't mean it's always the same thing. So we need to amend that section of code to clarify the definitions there. And we also need to amend that section of code that provides an automatic trigger to reconvene the legislature in the case of an emergency or a disaster in order to protect all the public. On March 18th, our governor adopted the White House 15-day guidelines in Idaho. And I remember that time where we were asked as citizens all across the country there was a lot of fear, we didn't know what was happening with this virus, and all of us were asked to stay at home as much as we could in order to help bend that curve. And And I think all of us were trying to be good citizens and honor that from our president. On that same day, March 18th, I sent a letter to Senator Pro Tem Hill asking him to assume the duties of presiding over the Senate for the afternoon session. The Senate had completed its calendar, but was waiting on the House, the governor, and the retirement speeches. And I was falsely accused by the fake news of abandoning my post on the Senate floor. Jason, if you could show the first slide, because I had some important business to take care of back home.
Jason's working.
While we wait for the slide, you have dessert, so if you just add the nicely quietly on back. You want dessert?
Okay.
Exactly. There it is.
I had some important business to take care of back home at the time. My husband was traveling, he was sailing around the island, out of the country, not sure if he could get back home. Both of our kids, Liza and James, were in Idaho Falls trying to run our 5 businesses on their own. And my elderly parents back in Idaho Falls, they needed help. And my job when I went back home was to try to find toilet paper, spirit all the stores, try to go as early as I could every day and find toilet paper. For who would have thought toilet paper? And I think the last time I was up here in North Idaho was at one of the Lincoln Circuit events, and I remember going into 3 stores and finding empty shelves of toilet paper. It's so bizarre. Brings back wonderful, wonderful memories. Okay, so moving on to the next week, the following week, on March 23rd, it was a Tuesday, I had a phone call with our governor. And during this call, the governor mentioned to me that this was at the time when the mayor of Boise had started shutting down all their downtown restaurants. And our governor mentioned to me that while the Boise restaurants were closed, all the business was just going across the road to Garden City. And there was no, in this phone call, there was no mention of what was about to happen in our state 2 days later when he issued the statewide isolation order. On March 25th, 2 days later, he issued the statewide order to self-isolate for the state of Idaho under Idaho Code 46601, which gives the governor the right to exercise all police power vested in the state by the Constitution and the laws of Idaho. This order directed all residents to self-isolate at their place of residence. This was a violation of Idaho Code 56-1001, in which the definition of isolation means the separation of infected persons or a person suspected to be infected from other persons. That's the definition in our statute. The order stated that all persons may leave their residences only for certain essential services, directed all non-essential businesses to cease operations, and that was written in the order, prohibited non-essential gatherings of any number of individuals, including faith-based services. Ordered the cessation of non-essential travel. This decision triggered massive unemployment, massive statewide unemployment. And because in a committee that I work on to find efficiencies in state government, and our economy was doing so well, we were starting to shut down Department of Labor offices across the state, and they were doing work out of their home and in their cars. So suddenly we had massive unemployment that was at rates higher than we have ever seen in the state of Idaho, with delays of up to 12 weeks of unemployment benefits going out to our people of Idaho. They were suffering. On April the 7th, the governor appointed the Coronavirus Financial Advisory Committee to make recommendations of the $1.7 billion in CARES funding that came to our state. I was appointed to serve on that committee, and I have to say that I'm struggling more and more as this goes on, because I feel that it is unconstitutional for this money to be being spent in certain ways, and I'm really struggling to be making recommendations that I feel are beyond the scope of the executive branch of government. On the 14th of April, I wrote a letter to our governor asking him, because these businesses have been shut down and people were suffering, I asked him to please provide greater clarification to the people of Idaho when to reopen the economy, eliminate the one-size-fits-all definition of essential businesses, and to provide unprecedented tax relief to the citizens of Idaho. And I gave a couple of suggestions. We could delay the second half of property tax. We could delay any corporate or individual income tax, and we could do a sales tax holiday. There's any number of options that could have been taken. And I also, once again, stated my opposition to the extension of the isolation order or the shutdown of any business past April 30th, 2020. The next, Jason, if you would go ahead, and what I'm going to show you next is a short little video clip that I put together back then in April 25. I was also falsely accused by the fake news of traveling all over the state, encouraging people to disobey the government, and attending these rallies all over the state outside of the governor's order. But on April 25, we did host a virtual rally, and it was titled, "All Jobs Are Essential." And we encouraged people in southeast Idaho to go in their cars, go to their courthouse, and just honk their horn. Watch us on Facebook Live, honk your horn so that you can show support of sending a message to the governor, encouraging him to end this on April the 30th. So, Jason, if you could go ahead and show that short video clip at this time. I know it was working because we checked it earlier, so patience.
essential.
I've never considered myself unessential, and I don't think the government has the right to say that I am.
I am essential. Well, thank you for your patience there, because I wanted you to see a face to a lot of these people and how these decisions have affected the individual. That beautiful young woman right there is our daughter, Liza. And when the government defines a business to be either essential or non-essential, it also classifies the people who work in those businesses as either being essential or unessential. And that has been very painful and very divisive for our state, for the people of Idaho. So the difference between this order that was issued on March 25th, our federal government issued a set of guidelines, and it was titled, it was from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. It was titled, it was a list that said, this list is intended to help state, local, tribal, and territorial officials as they work to protect their communities while ensuring continuity of functions critical to public health and safety, as well as economic and national security. It was what recognized critical infrastructure workforce, and for the purpose of that. It never did say that if a business didn't fit into one of these categories, that you needed to shut down. And it was included in this list from the federal government was listed clergy for essential functions and elections personnel to include both public and private sector elections support. It went on to further state, this list is advisory in nature. It is not, nor should it be considered, a federal directive or a standard. Additionally, this advisory list is not intended to be the exclusive list of critical infrastructure sectors, workers, and functions that should continue during the COVID-19 response across all jurisdictions. Individual jurisdictions should add or subtract essential workforce categories based on their own requirements and discretion. I apologize for the video slide on that day. It was the day. If it's in any way offensive to you, that was the day those are our employees. It was the day the order was issued, and I have to admit, we were all a bit parched back then. Those who live in plexiglass houses that are not affected by these decisions may not fully understand what many in Idaho have experienced this past year. If you want to, Jason, if you want to go to the next slide, and I will start to discuss property tax and property rights issues. So I am thankful because the governor did hear our cries, and the statewide isolation order was lifted on April 30th. So the next day, I left my home community and I traveled up to Kendrick, Idaho, because I was invited by a proprietor to attend the opening of their business on that day at the Hardware Brewing Company. Here is where a big area of property rights discussion comes into play, because whether we own property or if we are entered into a lease agreement, that space is our property, and the government at any level has no place in interfering with what we do on our property. Unless, of course, we're doing something illegal like cooking meth or running a prostitution ring. But when I went up there because I wanted to show support to these people, and they were opening up because they had to. They weren't trying to be stubborn or ornery, but the owner, Christine, she said, I don't know what else to do. You know, you can't be shut down for 5 weeks and have zero income coming in. You have to pay your taxes, you have to pay your electricity bills, you have employees you have to take care of. And so she said, we're doing it because we have to. We have to stay in business. On June the 1st, Idaho State Police issued Hardware Brewing a $2,500 citation to the business in violation of the Stay Healthy Order. And I know of 4 other businesses in Idaho that received the same citation. And again, when it comes to property rights issues, this is a violation of a property right, because when we, as a business or an individual, a proprietor, enter into an agreement with our government body, whether it's a license for selling food, a license for selling alcohol, a cosmetology license, no matter what license that we receive from the entity, the government entity, it's an agreement where we both parties enter into this agreement, and we agree to comply with certain terms and conditions. And so we enter into this agreement knowing what the rules are, and we do everything we can to comply with the rules. But this citation that came to this business and several other was a violation of that contract, because that wasn't part of the agreement. It was something that came in like after the fact of the agreement. And so this is an area of code that I think could be strengthened. To my friends in the legislature that are here tonight, to take a look at that contract law. I know there's an area where that was shored up, and if it could be applied more broadly to any business operation that has a license between the government entity. I think that would do a lot to help protect some of the problems that we've seen in our state. Jason, if you want to go to the next slide. This is a discussion on property tax, and I pulled a quote from back in 1992, and I don't mean to speak disrespectfully to you in any way, but James Carville was quoted back then in the election. He said, it's the economy, stupid. Well, when it comes to property tax, it's the budget. And this, what I've done is I've put together, it's a little complex, but up on the top, I took the year, the budget year, the budget amount, the assessed value of the property, the levy rate, the tax per 100,000, and then if you had a $300,000 home, what your tax would have been under that scenario. And to illustrate the point that it's all about the spending of the burden of your property tax is all about the spending. If you would have taken the same budget and kept it consistent, you can see that even as assessed value goes up, if they keep the budget spending under control, over here, the bottom line, where you start out at paying $777 a year property tax, even when your assessed value goes up, if they keep the spending under control, your tax that you pay would actually have gone down to $485 per year. That's a very simple illustration, and I recognize that property tax is very complex. There are many factors. There's the city levy. There are school budgets that come into play. There are also other issues such as taking land off of the tax rolls that and not being given any way to replace that with revenue. That's also a big issue. And when we were in Benoit County, and today they were talking about that, about some of the land that the land board wants to, again, take off their tax roll. And when they do that, and when the decisions by the land board, when they do that and they don't replace that revenue, then the burden of the property tax, the burden of the budget of that county, then it gets dispersed even more burdensome across all the other property taxpayers. So that I wanted to just kind of show that to you as an illustration of a simple view of what the real problem is with property tax and how the legislature can't, people, the only way the legislature can really fix this is to continue to put more caps on the spending. But you can affect these budgets by showing up at the budget hearings at your city and your county, and I encourage you to do that and be more involved. On May 1st, the day after the order was lifted, and now we're thinking about moving forward. What's the future of our state look like moving forward after this? On May 1st, I did, after the order was lifted, I traveled to Boise to attend a Liberate Idaho prayer rally at the Capitol, and the scripture that they had on display there came from 2 Corinthians 3:17, where it says, "Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom." That is the future of our country and our state, that if we need to turn our hearts back to God and not forget about the principles that we have been blessed with as citizens of this great country of Idaho. That's a big part of our Jason, if you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so fast forward to August 23rd, after the governor had called for a special session of the legislature, and I spent my last day in Idaho Falls with my husband. We went on a bike ride, a Sunday afternoon bike ride, and we saw this beautiful field of sunflowers. I'd never seen so many of them all in one place. It was absolutely beautiful. It was very calming and peaceful as I was getting ready to head back to the Capitol, because honestly, I had some apprehension about going back to Boise at the time. I'd been advocating for the legislature to be more involved, but back in Ada County, the local public health district had taken Ada County backwards to stage 2, and they were stage 3, and they were limiting gatherings of people to no more than 10. And so I'm thinking, how's this going to work? People of Idaho for 6 months have been frustrated, and finally they have an opportunity for their voice to be heard, and they want to come to the Capitol and be heard, and the public order said no more than 10 people to be gathered. So I was concerned about that. I was concerned about some of the language that was being discussed. I listened to the working group committee that was talking about a bill on immunity, liability relief, and the bill that passed out of the committee that was supported in the proclamation was going to give government immunity on the decisions, and it was also written so that business communities would become the enforcers of these government mandates, and it was very, very troublesome. So I had mixed feelings. Next slide, Jason, if you will. I had mixed feelings, but on that day, Monday morning, I gathered with some members of the legislature, and we met for prayer at the very beginning of the day. And together, we prayed, asking God for courage, wisdom, and guidance. We prayed that the voice of the people would be heard, and that the healing process would begin here in Idaho. We prayed for God's will in our state and our nation. And one of the most important and encouraging things to me during this special session was seeing the Idaho citizens turn out by the hundreds to observe the process and to make their voices heard. So all told, I would say that the end result of the special extraordinary session was good, because they chose a different immunity bill, a blanket immunity bill, no conditions. It just simply stated no person, no business, no church, no facility could be held liable if somebody was infected in your facility. I felt like that was a good bill. And the other bill that passed was a bill to guarantee, notwithstanding any other emergency orders, that here in Idaho we would have in-person voting come November the 4th. So I thank the members of the legislature for doing that. Some members of the legislature wanted to call an end to the emergency declaration. The House passed the statute does say that by concurrent resolution, the legislature may end the emergency order by the concurrent resolution between the House and the Senate. It passed strongly out of the House. The Senate members had some concerns about the constitutional issue. And again, this is, we need to learn from this because our Constitution does say that the governor may call for a special session, but it limits it to certain things. And so the ending of the declaration wasn't a part of that. And the Senate had a concern with that. And they chose not to concur with the House resolution, but they did write up their own resolution. One of the things that I really appreciate about both resolutions is that both bodies recognize that there's a critical need, that in order to secure the liberties of Idahoans and to restore a proper balance of power between the executive and legislative branches of government. And so the Senate resolution stated in part, whereas the Senate desires to take steps to maintain the constitutional balance of power in times of emergency. This will be accomplished by making some statutory changes to our code and to our Constitution. So I do believe that both bodies are committed to making these changes. We need to learn from these mistakes. Learn from the decisions that have been made in our state. We learned a lot after Hurricane Katrina, just as an example across the nation. After Hurricane Katrina, we saw how the local officials were starting to go around gathering up firearms of people there in that state. So guess what? Your Idaho legislature did that year. They quickly changed those statutes, both of those sections of code, to state specifically that no change could be made to affect our Second Amendment rights here in Idaho. Jason, if you can go to the next slide real quickly. I believe that together we all need to recommit to the foundational principles which are grounded in our Constitution and which make America the greatest nation on earth. And so I've come up with, together, not just me, but my team, we've come up with this Constitutional Unity Pledge. And I don't have time to read it, it's a bit lengthy, but I'm asking you, I think we are at a crossroads, and my ask to you is that this is our time. The future of Idaho does belong to us, and what we want Idaho to look like, but it's our choice. We need to decide that now is the time to stand, to put aside the personality, quit thinking about the next election that's coming up, and take a stand to defend our principles, the strong foundational principles that this nation and this state are founded on. And we can do that by recommitting to our Constitution and pledging together to stand for the principles that are in our Constitution. And I think that can reach across the spectrum, whichever political affiliate you are with. So to close, I appreciate your time. I've shared a lot of my experience with you. But to close, the next slide, Jason, I also believe that the state, the future of our state is with our youth and our families. This is a recent event over in the Wood River Valley. One of the Senate candidates over there who has a good chance of, as a Republican, a good chance of changing the Senate seat over in the Wood River Valley. And this young lady, she's a high school student, and candidate Eric Parker was talking to her at a taco truck and just started a conversation and said, why don't you come to this event that we were having for both the candidates in Legislative District 26. So she came to our event, and she was so enthusiastic, and I talked to her, and I said, I didn't know who she was. Her name's Kylie. I said, Kylie, would you like to just take a minute, take the microphone, and just tell everyone? We had 150 people there that night. I handed her the microphone and said, just tell us a little bit about who you are and what your interests are and what's important to you. So she did. And it was interesting, she talked about her generation, that too many of them are disengaged and watch videos too much. But she said, we need to be involved. And a simple thing, just handing a young person a book to read so that they can learn and be involved. And then the final slide that I wanted to show you, Jason, this beautiful picture. Sorry, this one touches my heart because this is Destiny. Destiny, who was struggling for weeks and didn't have any income to feed her 5 beautiful girls, a single mom trying to provide for her family. And when she saw my picture of the sunflower, she said, where did you get that picture? She took her family out there to take a family picture. But that's what we need to do here in Idaho today. We need to work together to fix our laws, work on our Constitution, protect our republic, and for the future of these young people. So I will leave you with this. I thank you all for being here. Thanks for your engagement, and God bless all of you. Just thank you all so much for being here tonight.